What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch. I'm sure everybody's having a lot of fun with DOOMFIST, but sometimes it's time to ruin everyone else's fun and utilize the counters to such a new and exciting hero. Now, DOOMFIST is a very special type of new hero because unlike every other hero before him, he has what we would call a very sharp edge, meaning that he both is incredibly strong at the thing that he does, but at the same time incredibly weak towards so many different things. Typically, heroes are much more streamlined, much more flexible in a variety of situations, whereas DOOMFIST both punishes and gets punished very severely. With that being the case, there's a lot of things that you can utilize to counter him, but it's a little bit more complicated than just viewing what's good against him in general, because, of course, a good DOOMFIST is going to present you with new challenges that simply utilizing a hero that on paper is good against him won't be able to realize in play when the two meet head to head. Of course, there's another issue that you have to worry about, is that when you pick a hero that counters a specific hero like DOOMFIST, you also have to weigh up the liabilities that it creates, and a great example of that is Bastion. Of course, Bastion can't get knocked around by DOOMFIST, but because he's such a niche hero in his own right, he's not going to top the list when it comes to counters because it requires the rest of your team comp to really organize around the Bastion in a way where it makes sense. Because, of course, Overwatch isn't a 1v1 game, it's a team-based game. Okay, so a lot of complicated preamble, but let's get right into what actually counters DOOMFIST. Number one, on top of everything, is Mccree. If you have the skills to play Mccree, he is great at defeating DOOMFIST at all sorts of engagements. In the past, Mccree has struggled against flanky-type characters because he has to thread the needle, a pixel-perfect accurate shot on what typically is a very small hitbox with Genji and Tracer is much easier to hit reliably on DOOMFIST, who's much more akin to the size of Reaper, who, of course, Mccree is also sick against. And now, especially with his stun, being able to stop any character dead in its tracks, Mccree is the #1 counter to DOOMFIST. Of course, like all squishies, if DOOMFIST does catch you out, punching you into a wall, you will be instantly dead, but Mccree's playstyle is a bit more guarded than that. A smart Mccree takes positioning which is going to be expensive for a DOOMFIST to traverse the map to get to him, and when he does, he has a stun awaiting to potentially insta-win the duel from there. And that's going to be the key. The things that are going to counter DOOMFIST the best is burst damage and crowd control. Mccree has all of this, with punishing headshot burst damage, as well as a stun that DOOMFIST cannot block. Now, I think it's even more important to get into misconceptions about DOOMFIST after we've already nailed what the best counter is. The truth is, DOOMFIST is such a fragile dive hero that if the enemy team is running a divey style DOOMFIST, you can run a number of heroes that are going to look really strong against him. Roadhog, Junkrat, Hanzo, Widowmaker if she plays far enough back. He's going to struggle against the flanker heroes, Genji and Tracer when he's in open space, Sombra as well, of course. Farah, he's going to struggle to reach up in air. When you start to line up all of these different counters, quote-unquote, in isolation, each one of these makes it seem like DOOMFIST can't fight anything, right? Well, it's not that simple, because you can't just think about what DOOMFIST will need to do to win a duel 1v1, but instead think about where DOOMFIST ideally is going to be playing, and how do you stop that from being effective when he's doing so? And of course, we've mentioned this before, but we envision DOOMFIST to be the ideal enforcer hero. D.Va has been the meta-approved peeling hero that's able to peel back when an enemy dive comes in to be able to protect your fragile supports, especially Zenyatta. Well, now, DOOMFIST has that peeling playstyle, but with a punch. And I mean that literally, of course. An insta-kill waiting around the corner anytime you try to take positioning into him. So if that's deemed to be the case, you can envision DOOMFIST's playstyle to be similar to Reaper's, in that he wants to always be staying in the smartest, strongest position possible. So these ideal scenarios where you're going to be catching him out when he's out in the open space or pursuing your backline shouldn't really happen on paper, because if they do, I think you're going to find that just about every ranged character in the game can feel competent at killing him. So with that being the case, let's go over a few characters that you probably don't want to fall into pitfalls into assuming that they're particularly strong against DOOMFIST, and that's going to be Soldier 76 at the top of the list. Soldier's burst damage is nowhere near good enough to shred through DOOMFIST, as Helix Rocket does 120 damage, which still is only about half of his health. And the problem with dueling DOOMFIST is that if you can't kill him fast enough, he will insta-kill you. So any character that's not high in mobility to be able to avoid that duel completely, or high in burst damage like Mccree or Hanzo, especially at close range with a stun or a scatter arrow, are going to struggle. In this regard, Soldier's going to have to constantly be running away from DOOMFIST, and I gotta tell you, DOOMFIST's ability to jump super high in the air to traverse the map much stronger than Soldier can. You're going to want to avoid using Soldier against him, because a good DOOMFIST actually looks good at diving your line if you're playing Soldier. Now I have to mention, like every rule that there is in Overwatch, there is an exception to it. I'm sure that either for a period of time or at certain levels of matchmaking, Soldier will be amazing at destroying DOOMFIST, but not because DOOMFIST is bad against Soldier, but that DOOMFIST is hard to play. For example, Hanzo counters Soldier too in some ways if you're a sick Hanzo. So I suppose it's fair to say that it's a skill matchup. I just feel like the skills to be able to traverse the map intelligently, avoid ranged sightlines, and then pounce a Soldier to unload all of your instant death onto him is more likely to happen when DOOMFIST players learn how to play. Bad DOOMFISTs get killed by everything. It's really easy to kill him. Good DOOMFISTs get killed by everything, don't get me wrong. But players that take the time to really respect where DOOMFIST has to be in order to not die instantly won't die to Soldier. They will die to things that they don't have time to react to because either they're too fast or they stop him from moving. That's the key. Remember, you can't get into an extended battle with DOOMFIST because each hit he lands, he's gaining shields. So if he can land an ability on you as Soldier, he's going to negate like a bullet or two that you're trying to do, whereas you kind of want heroes that can instantly punish him for the positioning that he has. So what are characters that can do that? Mccree, Hanzo, Junkrat, and Roadhog all have the very quick burst damage that it takes to punish a diving DOOMFIST. What might not be so obvious is why other counters aren't as harsh to deal with a good DOOMFIST to shut him down. I mentioned Soldier already, but also to that point, there's some characters that are deemed strong against him that are just kind of too slow to prevent him from getting the value that he wants to get. Farah is a great one because she doesn't have the ability to stop him from diving. She's in the air, of course. So anytime you have a Farah or a pharmacy, your ground forces are lessened, making open windows for him to be able to go find a duel that he wants. He can't duel the Farah very well, but she doesn't kill him too quickly either, as his movement is pretty adept at dodging rockets. You'll need 2 damage boosted rockets to directly land, or 2.5 directs otherwise. That's a lot of time, guys. He's probably going to kill a teammate of yours in the meantime, and it's going to be a bit of an awkward engagement. If you yourself are dying to DOOMFIST, swapping to Farah isn't a bad thing, but I have trouble saying that she's a counter. Because when you have 2 characters that are more or less ships passing in the night and avoid each other by one means or another, it's tough to say that they're a counter. Now, a controversial one is saying Sombra is a bit overrated against him as well, because although Hack is devastating to DOOMFIST, the problem is, once he's in the engagement, if he's a good DOOMFIST, he already has done his damage before Hack has its time to become valuable. Luckily, with her mobility, she should be able to avoid the duel with DOOMFIST, unlike Soldier. It's just the thing that makes me wary of suggesting Sombra against a DOOMFIST is that what you really want is something that stops him dead in his tracks, not disables him as he's in the middle of the action. She's by no means a bad hero against DOOMFIST. If an enemy DOOMFIST is a problem for you, definitely have her alongside the other things that I do suggest. I just don't think she's the best counter, and thereby can fall a little short if she's the only character you're expecting to be able to stop him from doing what he wants to do. And to that same degree, a lot of players are confident that their Tracer play is so good that they'll be able to outplay DOOMFIST, but what you're going to find is good DOOMFISTs control valuable space. They deny lanes, they don't overly aggress. If you catch him out in the open, every character kills him, including Tracer. But a good DOOMFIST denies Tracer's movement from getting where she needs to be. That's basically in a nutshell how the Enforcer playstyle works. They're characters that can get their value by simply waiting and holding good positioning. They don't have to go out and try to perform something. They can allow the enemy to come to them and make a mistake. Tracer, on the other hand, is a dive hero, because if she's not dealing damage and not getting pulse bombs, which in order to get, she has to be harassing and dealing damage, it's not like there's value in her kit to be found elsewhere. DOOMFIST doesn't need a pulse bomb to get an insta-kill. He's waiting for you to walk into his positioning. So like if DOOMFIST is guarding the cart and his supports, what does Tracer do? Very little poke damage from afar. And if he just waits holding the right positioning the entire time, you lose. You need him to go bait out into a fight where he's weak. However, of course, in the scenarios where Tracer can just hold open ground herself and DOOMFIST has to play aggressively, he's bad, but I just think you don't pick him in those scenarios. Tracer's in a must-pick all the time type meta position right now where she's just sick all the time. Well, I think that just changes when DOOMFIST is a pickable hero, and he is more of a specific tool for a specific job type character. He isn't a everyman pick all the time type thing because his skill set is niche in some ways. But when you get that to work, you definitely better be coming prepared with the right hero. You can't just pick these old school meta-defined, these are really stable output picks, Soldier and Tracer, they just do everything, right? Well, if you play smart, you just die easily. You die easier than you've ever died before, okay? It doesn't require a Hanzo headshot. It doesn't require some really flashy Genji shenanigans. It just requires a DOOMFIST to be smart enough to know where he needs to be and hold right click. It's not, if I can do it, anybody can do it. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, I know, I've talked forever. It's a complicated issue. Forgive me. On to our last section. The other important option that we have to mention is just going tank heavy with your lineup. If you're running triple tank, no matter what it is, DOOMFIST is fairly weak at destroying a tank. Yes, he can crowd control the dive tanks. He has the ability to do tons of damage in a very short space of time if he hits all of his combos and all of his abilities land. The problem with that is, he does a classic rope-a-dope tiring himself out if he has to use all of his resources to kill a tank. Yes, he can do it, but he ain't doing it twice, right? He'd much rather have squishies abound nearby to be able to get an insta-kill on them into a wall, rather than need to all of a sudden to produce all of his abilities yet again, including his ammo, which you have to remember is short in supply as well, because you can't fully reload it when you need it. It has to come back slowly. All of this makes him fairly inefficient against any triple tank combination that you want to use. Roadhog is the best 1v1 style counter, but we may just as easily see multiple tanks of any stripe used to just slow down DOOMFIST. I'm sure many have wondered if I was ever going to mention Arisa in the video. On paper, Arisa is pretty sick against DOOMFIST, but only when he's playing aggressively. That's part of the problem that I have with these tank picks. I don't know if you ever are going to succeed with a aggressive offensive DOOMFIST anyway. Sure, you might be able to prop him up with a Zarya bubble, but that only works so far. The Arisa definitely counters all that, but it counters it so hard that it probably isn't even going to be deemed a viable strategy anyway. That's one thing that's interesting about Overwatch meta and games in general, is that if something is so good at countering another thing, it just won't even be attempted to some degree. And I think that's the case with Arisa. What's Arisa great at? Well, like Arisa Torb right now is a really stable style of defensive comp. Well, you wouldn't dive into that anyway. DOOMFIST is great at countering things that want to be diving his impactful targets, not necessarily going after turrets and Arisa anyway. He's not the tank buster, he's not the turret buster. None of that stuff is going to really come into effect. Yes, you should keep in the back of your mind, if you have an aggressive DOOMFIST, Arisa is yet another one of the long list of great counters against DOOMFIST, just like any of the others that you could pick. But to that same degree, you probably could just pick 3 tanks anyway and be pretty good against him as well. It all depends on the type of DOOMFIST you're playing against. If he's a dive-happy DOOMFIST, the world is your oyster as far as I'm concerned. Whichever option of anti-DOOMFIST dive you want to go with is probably going to be really strong. The more complicated question, however, is when DOOMFIST is played in his ideal playstyle, which we think is going to be the Enforcer playstyle, where do you go from there? If he's diving you, a defensive Mccree, Sombra, Hanzo, Torb, Roadhog, and even Ana and Zen to some degree are fairly strong at punishing his movement and aggression towards you. If he's playing defensively, however, Hanzo, Mccree, Farah, and Widowmaker will look to be stronger to stop him from disabling your aggressive moves. Junkrat and Bastion obviously are good against it as well, but they're so niche in their own right that it's difficult for me to say that they're a great pick because they corner you into being very counterable yourself. DOOMFIST is an incredibly exciting hero, and we really hope that you're enjoying not only his playstyle, but the meta shifting implications that he has rocket punching his way into the game. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe because we upload each and every day, so you're gonna wanna hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Linked in the description, you can check out our Twitter and our Discord server where you can interact with our community and find the DOOMFIST main of your dreams. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.